In the wake of their stunning defeat, Democrats and legacy media have been unusually receptive to hearing a little bit from Bernie Sanders and his assessment of what went wrong. Of course, this openness comes roughly a decade too late, but it is much deserved. He's been correct on many things, from our disastrous wars to Wall Street's impunity to the Democratic Party's disastrous abandonment of working class people. And now, in a viral clip, Bernie Sanders is sounding the alarm on American oligarchy. Take a listen.
We are moving rapidly into an oligarchic form of society. Never before in American history have so few billionaires, so few people had so much wealth and so much power. Never before has there been so much concentration of ownership, sector after sector, power of Wall Street, and never before in American history, and we better talk about this, have the people on top had so much political power. We can't go around the world saying, oh, well, in Russia, Putin has an oligarchy. Well, we got an oligarchy here, too. And in this last election, in both parties, billionaires spent huge amounts of money to elect their candidates.
Now, the pathway to this oligarchy was paved with many things. You had Supreme Court decisions opening the floodgates of unlimited campaign contributions. You had the Republican Party's long-held position carrying water for the wealthy. And you had the Democratic Party's Clinton-era capitulation to these very same forces. All of these developments led to the money over everything nature of the most recent presidential election, in which Kamala Harris raised record-breaking amounts of cash in a record-breaking amount of time, and where Trump openly promised billionaires he would do their bidding if he was elected. Now, his campaign received extraordinary bribes, $100 million from Miriam Adelson, over $250 million from Elon Musk. Musk's donation was of a size that, at least as far as we know, has never before seen in history. And Trump is already rewarding his big donors with consequential roles and what amounts to a brazen selling of government positions. According to a CNN analysis, nearly 36 of Trump's key administration picks were donors to his campaign. Now, of course, rewarding supporters with positions, that is also nothing new. But the size and scope here are truly without parallel. So for comparison, Joe Biden staffed his admin with 12 people who had previously donated to his campaign or affiliated groups. But where those 12 combined for contributions of about $100,000, Trump's key picks, they combined for $37 million in contributions, and that's without including Elon Musk, who put $262 million in and now has this powerful whole-of-government position to remake the entire federal government to suit his personal whims and desires. Yes, American oligarchy has been a long time in the making, but in the incoming administration, it is in full bloom like never before. And you can see the telltale signs, both in government molding itself to serve favored oligarchs and in the behavior of wealthy elites who are vying for status as favored oligarchs. Toward that end, we've already been witness to some shameful billionaire groveling. According to NPR, major Silicon Valley executives like Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, and Sam Altman, who had previously been Trump adversaries, are dishing out millions to the Trump inauguration in order to curry favor with the incoming president. Salesforce CEO Mark Benioff says he is, quote, turning the page on his Trump relationship, and I'm sure it doesn't hurt that Time magazine, owned by Benioff, just declared Trump Person of the Year. Silicon Valley historian Margaret O'Mara told NPR, quote, taken together, the donations and other celebratory gestures showcase an industry kissing the ring of an incoming president in hopes of something in return. It's just a recognition that there's not much to be gained in opposition, but perhaps there is something to be gained by being very clear about your support and hope that Trump does well. Now, Trump himself yesterday actually commented on this shameless groveling. Let's take a listen to that.
Did you talk about tariffs in that meeting?
Meeting with who?
Apple CEO Tim Cook.
I did have dinner with Tim Cook. I had dinner with sort of almost all of them, and the rest are coming. And this is one of the big differences, I think, between, we were talking about it before, one of the big differences between the first term. In the first term, everybody was fighting me. In this term, everybody wants to be my friend. I don't know. My personality changed or something. But I had, as you know, I had Sundar from Google, but I also had Sergey. Nobody reported that. Sergey is the owner, the primary owner, along with his friend, as you know. And Sergey was here also. I can't believe you didn't pick that one up. Nobody picked that up. But I will tell you, no, it's a big difference. The big difference is that the first time everybody was fighting me.
No, Mr. Trump, I don't think your personality changed, but apparently their self-interested calculus did. And they all went in on the spoils of government largesse and to avoid getting crosswise with the new regime. So, What does rule by a cabal of billionaires actually look like? Well, effectively, the project is a familiar one. It's rugged individualism for you and pampered coddling for the favored few. They want to strip away all powers of the government to curb corporate excess while juicing their own tax cuts, subsidies, and contracts. For a more granular view of how this project will operate, one person you should pay attention to is Silicon Valley investor Mark Andreessen. Now, Andreessen says that he has been spending half his time in Florida with Trump, helping to staff and guide the incoming administration. He is also a close buddy of Elon, an ally, having invested hundreds of millions in Elon's various ventures and having backed him in his Twitter takeover. In a podcast with Barry Weiss, Andreessen confirmed that he's advising Trump on tech, business, economics, and the, quote, success of the country, and is also helping staff up Musk's Doge commission. Andreessen and Musk have both been upfront about their plan to undercut any government regulator that has ever stood in their or their portfolio companies, in the case of Andreessen's, way. They are taking aim at the CFPB, which has been inconvenient for some of Andreessen's scammier portfolio investments, the SEC, which has had the gall to check Elon on alleged stock manipulation, and furthermore has tried to protect people from crypto scams, and the NLRB, which allows workers to form unions. In addition, the incoming Trump administration is taking aim at specific regulations that the ascendant oligarchs find inconvenient. Reuters has reported that the Trump transition team is recommending elimination of an automated vehicle crash reporting requirement that has proven irksome to Tesla. Now, you can see why Elon might not be a fan of this particular provision. According to the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration, 40 out of the 45 fatal crashes that were reported to the agency under this provision involved a Tesla, including an accident where a driver using autopilot careened into a tractor trailer and another where a Tesla hit a fire truck, killing the driver and injuring 4 firemen. And the Trump transition team describes this data collection as, quote, excessive. But it proved extremely valuable in agency investigations, which led to 2023 Tesla safety recalls. In other words, the data collection was good for public safety, but it was bad for Elon. The public didn't give Trump more than $250 million, did they? So Elon apparently wins. Now, this is a comparatively small example, but if it's your loved one behind the wheel of a Tesla car on autopilot, it becomes a little more significant. And there is no entity outside the government with the power to make sure that as autonomous vehicles become mainstream, drivers, passengers, and bystanders are not put at undue risk for profit. Now, that applies obviously not just with vehicles, but with every sector, including the burgeoning AI and crypto sectors, which threaten the global financial system, systems of ethics, nation states, and potentially humanity itself. These billionaires are driven both by ideology and self-interest to make sure that their power is unlimited by any pesky checks of representative democracy. Now, such a project requires a continuation of the war on New Deal programs, which, in fairness, Republicans have been waging since the advent of the New Deal itself. Now, that's important to oligarchs for a few reasons. First of all, a secure social safety net and financially stable working class is less desperate. They have more leverage, more ability to tell an abusive boss to piss off and negotiate for higher wages and better conditions. What's more, a government that delivers for people in a meaningful way builds trust. It earns the confidence of the public. That imbues it with more potential power to check those oligarch excesses. So it should be no surprise that in a recent interview with Chris Williamson, Andreessen announced his desire to dismantle the remaining vestiges of the New Deal, pining for what he calls a reverse FDR. Take a listen.
The other lens on this that I think about a lot is Curtis Yarvin, who's also a good friend of mine. And the way he describes the American system that's running the people, the way he describes it is we are living under FDR's personal monarchy 80 years later without FDR. Right. And the reason he describes that, he says, look, when before FDR, the federal government was actually very small. Like the tax rates were like super low. The federal government didn't do very much. The FDR dramatically, by orders of magnitude increased the size and scope of the federal government. He did that for 2 reasons. One was the New Deal. And then the other was World War II. And so the federal government that Franklin Roosevelt left behind in 1945 when he passed away was the government that he had built, which he had run the entire time from 1933 to 1945 himself, in which he had staffed himself and he had overseen himself and everything. And he built this giant structure. And as Curtis basically says, as long as you had FDR running that, it could run really well. And, we won World War II and saved the free world, and it worked and pulled the U.S. out of depression. The whole thing worked and it was great. But if you let an organization of that size and scope run without its founder CEO for 80 years, you end up with what we have now, which is just basically an out of control bureaucracy, an out of control system in which people can't even make positive change, even if they want to.
Yeah.
And again, that's why you could have, in the US, you could have reason for optimism, which is, okay, what do you need? Well, you need another FDR-like figure, but in reverse, right? You need somebody and a team of people around them who's actually willing to come in and like take the thing by the throat and make the changes. By the way, make the changes that FDR would probably make if he were here to make them, but he's not, right? And so somebody else has to step up and do that. It has to be a president because nobody else conceivably has the power to do that. But we will see how much this president can do. But like that's a lot of what this administration plans to do.
So what you're hearing there, in spite of the modern techno sheen, the Trumpist branding, all of that, is at bottom old school Koch brothers, Reagan-style, Paul Ryan-esque austerity economics. Austerity for you anyway, not necessarily for them. Also noteworthy in Andreessen's response is the name-checking of his friend, Curtis Yarvin. Now, Yarvin opposes democracy outright. He would say that himself, in favor of either overt monarchy or sort of feudal corporatism with CEOs functioning as effectively kings. Undoubtedly a pretty cool philosophy if you are in line to be one of those corporate god kings. Not so much for those of us who would like to continue having some say in our governance and social contract. Now, this raises another important point, which helps to illuminate some of the early Trump administration moves. These guys hate democracy. And again, this isn't new. There's a long strain of elite opposition to democratic governance that stretches all the way back to the Founding Fathers. And the biggest bulwark against an anti-democracy ideology is a capable, democratically elected government providing clear material benefits. FDR understood this well. He understood how critical that was in his fight against fascism. In one of his fireside chats, he proclaimed, quote, "History proves that dictatorships do not grow out of strong and successful governments, but out of weak and helpless ones. If by democratic methods, people get a government strong enough to protect them from fear and starvation, their democracy succeeds. But if they do not, they grow impatient." So, if you believe in democracy, the best way to see it flourish is to build government capacity to deliver for people. And if you hate democracy, the best way to undermine it is to attack the most popular and successful elements of that government, to starve it, to shrink it, to make it incompetent, to make it corrupt. That's why Social Security and Medicare have long been targets for the right and for anti-populists in general. It's not in spite of their popularity, but because of it. And the same logic for our government's most popular agencies applies, such as the U.S. Postal Service. Now, the USPS does, honestly, a truly remarkable job delivering mail to every single location in the country, no matter how remote, on a daily basis. It's a marvel, and it is second only to the National Park Service as America's favorite agency. So naturally, it's now being targeted by Trump for elimination. That has a dual benefit for oligarchs. Not only does destruction of a popular government function further undermine popular commitment to democracy, it also gives an immediate sop to corporations like UPS and to FedEx. And spoiler alert, delivering to a remote village in Alaska or mountain hamlet in the hollers of West Virginia, it's not profitable. So many rural Americans will almost certainly be cut off from postal service entirely, or there'll be price gouge, charged exorbitant fees if Trump allows profit to become king in mail delivery. Cut, deregulate, privatize, but keep the goodies flowing always to the top. That's the playbook. Pain and sacrifice for the masses, bonanza of largesse for the favored oligarchs. Bernie is right to sound the alarm about American oligarchy because we are watching this project reach new levels of brazenness and control with few checks in sight. And to me, this is my central concern with what we're...
Hey guys, if you want to see what I had to say to Krystal's monologue, not just this one, all of them, going back to the very beginning, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com.